So, obviously by the title, my presentation is about Star Wars, so if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're doing working at a tech company if you haven't watched Star Wars. So everyone who has seen the prequel trilogy knows Emperor Palpatine, or Lord Sidious, is, the mastermind behind all the key points in the plot. He led Anakin to turn to the dark side, ended the Clone Wars, brought about the end of the Republic, but I propose to you, however, that Palpatine himself was not the mastermind, but was, in fact, a subordinate to a much more powerful, evil, and smarter master. In this presentation, I will seek to show that Jar Jar Binks is far from the bumbling idiot that he is portrayed in the movies, that he himself is a highly skilled Force user, and was not only the mastermind behind the downfall for the Republic, but will also be revealed to play a key role in the upcoming movies. I will start by establishing Jar Jar as a skilled warrior. While this does not, in fact, prove a direct connection to the Force, it is certainly suggestive in the Star Wars universe, because it's very rare that great warriors exhibit extraordinary physical feats without having some sort of Force proclivity. So we'll first look to this scene, where we see Jar Jar nonchalantly doing a 20-foot flipping jump into the air. Now, if Jar Jar was any sort of other character, or was introduced any sort of other way, you would automatically assume he was a Jedi, would you not? But we don't, because he's nothing to us more than a harmless dunce. He continues to convince us of this bumbling oaf act, even in the midst of battle, successfully taking down whole tanks, and in this part shown here, taking down 3 droids by using another droid attached to his leg. Taking down a droideka, a droid that we have seen challenge even the Jedi. Again, something that if anyone else did it, we would view them as Force sensitive, but just overlook it because it's Jar Jar. One of the reasons that Jar Jar has become one of the most hated characters in the Star Wars history is that he breaks that fourth wall. He shatters our suspension of disbelief. We dismiss him as a lame, cliched trope, and we think, no one can be that lucky. But what did Obi-Wan have to say about luck? I propose to you that this is actually a deliberate facade on the part of Jar Jar, that Jar Jar is meant to be paralleled to be practicing a particular style of Kung Fu known as Zi-Quan, which has the sole purpose of having seemingly random, almost drunk movements while using your body momentum, deception, and unpredictability to confuse opponents. If you look here, this is a clip from a Zi-Quan instructional video, and Jar Jar performing the same maneuver. Again, a clip from that same instructional video, and the Jar Jar equivalent. Or if you look here, this is the preparation move used in Zi-Quan, and then Jar Jar doing that same move right before he does his ridiculous Force jump. But even if you want to ignore his godlike presence in battle, there's a particular scene that directly parallels Jar Jar to a Force user. Please look to this scene. If you see, at the beginning, of course, he is just as stealthy as his Jedi counterparts. And if you watch him jump down and hang from that ledge, but then come down a couple seconds later and more over to the right than he was before. We can even look right here. You can see as this droid seems to be confused at the speed of which Jar Jar has changed its trajectory. And where have we seen this before? When a Jedi performed the same stunt while escaping from Jabba the Hutt. And again, when Obi-Wan is in the pit fighting Darth Maul. Now let's look past the overwhelming evidence showing that Jar Jar is proficient in the physical aspects of the Force. Let's now look at the evidence of that Jar Jar is also a master of mind control. If we look at some examples of mind control from the movies, we can see there's always a not-so-subtle hand wave while the Force user tells the other individual what they want. Well, here's Jar Jar convincing not Boss Nass to make him the general. Here he is convincing Padme to make him the senator. Watch the hand movements. And again, convincing the entire Senate to abandon democracy and give the Chancellor supreme powers. Now, if that is not a proficient Force user mind control, I don't know what is. Now, if you believe these previously stated points, you're almost forced to believe that Jar Jar Binks and Palpatine were co-conspirators. I mean, if Jar Jar is putting forth an elaborate act to deceive people, it means he's not a fool. And if he's not a fool, then it means his actions in Episode 2 that facilitate Palpatine's plans are not those of an unwitting tool, but are those of a partner. Remember, Palpatine and Jar Jar are from the same planet. And in the Star Wars universe, that's almost like being next-door neighbors to Force-sensitive people. It's entirely possible, if not probable, that they knew each other and maybe even trained with each other. This is even alluded to in this scene above. I talk about a master and an apprentice. Obviously the camera pans over to Palpatine, so they're obviously insinuating that he is one of them. But who is sitting next to Palpatine? None other than the Dark Lord himself. Furthermore, we were told that Jar Jar was tricked into giving the Chancellor supreme powers. So why is it that years later he's seen here in Palpatine's posse, acting as his right hand? This is someone who has been constantly seen stepping in poo and being a public embarrassment. Why is it that he is spending time with the most powerful person in the galaxy? Is it because he himself is the most powerful person? Here's George Lucas. In a documentary, he talked about Yoda, saying, Yoda really comes from a tradition of mythological storytelling, fairy tales, of the hero finding a little creature on the side of the road that seems very insignificant and not important, but who turns out to be the master wizard or master thing. As we all know, one of Lucas's big deals with the prequels is that they were intended to rhyme and mirror the original trilogy in terms of narrative themes. So there should be a sort of foil for Yoda, an innocent creature found on the side of the road that ends up being a major player. And we have that foil, Jar Jar, but he never actually develops into a master of anything. So here's what I think happened. I think Jar Jar was initially intended to be the prequel and dark side equivalent of Yoda. Just as Yoda had his big reveal where we learn that he's not a tottering generic goofball, remember when Yoda is first introduced, he's almost as bumbling and dumb as Jar Jar himself. I propose this is just a mask. Jar Jar was intended to have a big reveal in Episode 2 or 3 where we learn he's not a naive dope, but rather the master puppeteer in league with the Sith, or perhaps even in charge of them. However, George Lucas chickened out. The fan reaction that Jar Jar had was so severe that that entire aspect of the trilogy was abandoned. It was just too risky, and that's why Dooku seems like such a flat-shooting character with no backstory. He was hastily written in to cover up the plot holes where the villain Jar Jar was reacted. Yoda was meant to duel him with literal dark side nemesis, and maybe even Anakin kill him at the beginning of Episode 3. But I think that he was actually meant to escape. I just got a call. Sorry. So that he could cast a shadow on the entire original trilogy. So you'd rewatch the originals knowing that the Emperor was not actually the one, but that Jar Jar was out there somewhere. It really would have been quite brilliant. The actor Jar Jar even said in a recent Reddit AMA that there were huge changes to the story arc after the release of Phantom Menace. And if you really look back at the prequel trilogy, thinking of Jar Jar as the perpetrator of the fall of the Republic, you only recognize more and more evidence of the little spots where he manipulated the plot. Here he is found in the engine room, after which they start having engine trouble and have to replace the hyperdrive on Tatooine. And later, when talking with Anakin and Padme, Jar Jar alludes to how beautiful the Queen is, trying to push Anakin into that direction. And of course, you cannot deny that he has the same eye color as every single other Sith Lord. I believe that it's likely that the writers of the new trilogy will resurrect this idea. Most think to seem that, Disney wants to distance itself from the prequels, but I don't think that makes economic or even a marketing sense. There's much more prequel-era-based intellectual property to capitalize on than there is in the original trilogy. Because of the Clone Wars movies and series, billions of dollars in toys and characters, games, and park rides. I don't think that Disney is going to just throw away all this information they have of the original trilogy. And if we even see here, on a behind-the-scenes picture of the making of the new Star Wars movie, you can see two very clear guns that I believe are Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar Binks has undoubtedly been the face of, everything wrong with the prequels. He was just too silly, too unbelievable, seemingly pointless. if you were able to somehow change that, the nature of Jar Jar from, an embarrassing idiot to a jaw-dropping villain, suddenly the entire prequel trilogy must be seen in a new light, because it becomes the setup for the most astounding reveal in film history. Now, you may be thinking I'm crazy. There's no way that all of this could happen, but if it does, don't say I didn't warn you.